I appreciate you spending time with us. So usually it's me and my co-host Andrew. He wasn't able to join us because of a scheduling conflict, but for the past couple of years, we've been recapping one of our favorite childhood television shows, Family Matters, and we were looking through the list of credits and found that you were listed as a director of photography for 168 episodes between seasons 2 through 8. I know you directed 3 episodes. So
At
naturally,
least three. It might have been four. I'm not sure. Anyway.
okay. I mean, IMDb has 3, but I know from talking to co-creator William Bickley that IMDb may not give the complete picture. So your guess is probably better.
It's great you've been able to contact all these people.
Yeah. William Bickley, director Rich Carell, writer producer Gary Goodrich. I mean, we've had a lot of great people come on and talk, and we're glad to add you to the list. So first question for someone listening and watching who may not know what a director of photography does, do you mind explaining that?
I don't mind. A director of photography, DP, or cinematographer. It depends, on what part of the world you're in. But here in the States, we're known primarily as a director of photography. So I am the one who is responsible for how the show looks and how it's photographed, how it, from the first initial script meetings in all the way through post, but primarily on set. So I'm there every day with rehearsals and planning how the show is going to be lit, what we're doing with what are called swing sets. I mean, as you know, with Family Matters, as with a number of other, there are kind of what are known as permanent sets.
Like the living room.
Like the living room, like the kitchen. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the Winslow house. Yep.
So those get set a certain way, and then I will adjust accordingly from episode to episode, depending on what our action's going to be, what time of day it is. What we had a lot of stunts with Family Matters, as you know, so that was always that required a lot of attention. And then with each episode, generally there would be what are called swing sets. Some very simple. If you know the show, were really elaborate. I mean, we did things from having a frozen lake on stage to airplanes to boats to snow, rain. Anyway.
Yeah. And speaking of Frozen Lake, I'm automatically thinking of the season 2 episode that we recapped not too long ago, Ice Station Winslow, where Carl essentially forces his son Eddie to go ice fishing with him to spend some quality time. Was that an actual frozen lake?
That was all on stage.
That was all on stage. Yes, I would. Yeah, I remember talking to my co-host Andrew about how it very much looked like it was a set built on a soundstage as opposed to, like, I don't know, somewhere on Lake Placid. Is when you make those kind of decisions, is that more so because of financial reasons or because you just think that you could make a great set on a stage?
Well, right off the bat, yes, we could do some great sets, and we did. Um, uh, Lynn Griffin, who we unfortunately just lost recently, was the production designer. I think through almost all of the series, and yeah, we would plan and do what we needed to do to make it as realistic as possible. So the show was a challenge every week, but a lot of fun.
How so? Can you describe how it was a challenge?
Well, just like what we're talking about, now remember that. So these Family Matters, like many other situation comedies, hopefully are all done in front of an audience. So this is all live in front of an audience, every scene. So that requires a great deal of planning in order to, how do you fit like the frozen lake set you're referencing, or I just did, onto the stage and make it work seamlessly from beginning to end, because we would shoot in sequence, not like you would do in a feature film or some single camera episodes
So
where you can shoot out of order. Family Matters was presented like a play from the beginning to the end in sequence.
So when Carl drowns in that frozen lake and Eddie eventually saves him, like is Reginald VelJohnson literally like drowning in a lake that's making him really chilly, or is it just like
Yep.
warm water and we're
We had a
led to?
tank in there under the whole set was built on an elevation, so we could do this. Now, I can't quite remember. There are sometimes we would do some sequences as a pre-shoot
Mm.
part of it, just in order to be able to pull off some certain effects that wouldn't be as
Now, by pre-shoot, do you mean like shooting it without the audience present?
yeah,
Okay.
like the day before.
Yeah, yeah. Can you do you have a stunt in mind that really stands out to you where you're like, "Oh my God, like that was like a very challenging or a very fun experience as a director of photography." Any stunt from Family Matters that really stands out to your mind?
Well, I mean, we just mentioned one. There was another episode where we had Carl and Urkel in an airplane flying.
Yeah.
So that was all done on stage. Well, that was, a complicated setup, bringing in, gimbal to articulate this airplane and with the wind and clouds and all of that.
Wow.
Cranes, how to mount the cameras there. I mean, there were so many different stunts. I mean, we crashed cars, we burned things down, it was,
Yeah, you know what? The crash course from season 2 where Eddie crashes a car into the living room. I mean, aside from the story device of like, oh my God, like what are the chances someone's gonna drive a car through a house and be sober? But we were, yeah, just also wondering about the logistics of that. Like, I mean, it was a real car
yeah,
and
yep,
it crashed through the
yep.
set and I mean, wow, because you guys have to rebuild that set for the next episode as if it's nothing, right? So can you describe like what went into that decision to crash the set and
Well,
then have
I
to
mean,
rebuild it again?
we'd work with the special effects fellow we had, so that car was all rigged. So it had a positive start and stop, but that was all for safety reasons. But yeah, the set had to be that wall had to be dismantled and essentially rebuilt to be a breakaway so that it would safely break away. You know,
And I mean, since
and
you're producing the
once
yeah,
it's
go ahead.
done, yeah, you got to go back and rebuild it.
I mean, the show is produced week to week. So, like, did you guys have to take like a long hiatus to rebuild that set, or was it just kind of like you could do it? Yeah,
No, yeah, the thing with especially shows like this is you've got to have a great team
yeah.
behind you. But no, it's all done within the week. We came back the next week for the next episode.
Wow. How did you get the job on Family Matters in the first place? How did you get connected with them?
As best I recall, I think I don't know who first. Bob Boyette, who is just a tremendous individual and
Yeah.
has shepherded not only this show but many others. I've worked for Bob over the years on different projects, different shows. I don't know who first brought me to his attention, but I was actually involved at the time with working on a feature with Steven Spielberg called Hook.
Yeah, with Robin Williams.
Yeah, yeah, and Julia Roberts, and so I was doing one of the units. There were many units because that was a very complicated feature as well. And I remember I had to work out a time between shooting for Hook to come in and talk with Bob, and I think Rich Carell was part of that meeting too. So those are the first two people I met, and they offered me they wanted me to come in, take over the show for what would be the second season, and I was also coming in to shoot Perfect Strangers then too. So I was
Yeah.
actually doing two.
Yeah, the predecessor to Family Matters. So when you're going in to see like, Rich Carell, Bob Boyette of Miller Boyette Productions, which produced Family Matters, do you come in with like a specific like visual portfolio of your work, say some things that you shot already from?
Back in those days, no. I came in and it was
Wow.
they wanted to meet me. They knew my credits. They'd seen, some of what I'd done. It was kind of a meeting to see how we got along, what we felt about it, and how interested I was in joining them.
You joined Family Matters as DP in season two, so like, fall of 1990. Can you
Yeah.
kind of list what you had already come with? Just some of your credits, if you don't mind. Like,
Previously to that,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be all of them, but maybe just some that, like,
well, it was a varied time. I actually, on the heels of joining Family Matters, there was Hook. I'd actually done a little low budget feature for Roger Corman, right? Because a friend of mine had asked me to do that, which was all location up in the Sierras.
right.
That film was called A Cry in the Wild. But previously to that, I'd also done, it was called Second Unit on Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yes.
Um, I'd done the first multiple camera show that I did was the Tracy Ullman show
Oh yeah, yeah.
with which was when Fox became a network, or they were trying to be. This was one of their kind of shows they were launching with.
And I believe The Simpsons launched from that show because there was a little sketch that they had that turned The Simpsons into a series eventually. Yeah.
That was a great cast. I mean, Julie Kavner and Don Castellano. That were some great people. Sam Murray. But what was I going to say? So Tracy. So through that, I was working with Jim Brooks, who had started, had pitched that series.
Tracy Ullman?
Yeah, Jim Brooks. And so based on, I also did worked on a film with Jim Brooks called Broadcast News.
Mm.
So around that same time, all kinds of runs together.
You had mentioned working as like the second unit director of photography for Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is most known for being able to blend humans and animated characters. How does that make your job in that cinematic photographic world different as opposed to doing it just like straightforward with live action humans when you have to blend humans and animation like that? Yeah.
A lot of planning.
Yeah, talk about it.
Roger Rabbit was really unique at that time. I mean, yeah, in the you go through Hollywood history, and there have been instances of films combining animation with live action. It's like Gene Kelly did a famous dance number back in the day. I forget the name of the film, but and Disney had experience with that. I mean, I actually, previous to this, had worked with on the first Tron, which was kind of similar live action and
Hmm.
a lot of effects. But so going back to Roger Rabbit, we had a lot of planning because we were shooting the live action parts to which the animation was then added later.
Afterwards. Yeah.
Correct. So, blocking and camera angles and how it's lit is was really important so that it would translate properly when the animation was coming in. And there was a process that Bob Zemeckis and Richard Williams, who was the director of animation, um, they worked out a really great way of kind of making the animation three-dimensional with shadows. So it
Yeah.
wasn't just a flat character. Watch the film, you are very aware of, how kind of realistically uh, a character like Jessica Rabbit fits into.
Yeah.
And then we would work with cutouts of where, let's say, for example, Roger would be. So let's say if it was a scene with Bob Hoskins, he would know where to focus while we were shooting the live. And I was really impressed with him. To be able to act with an invisible character, and actually his focus was exactly where, let's say, Roger would be.
Right.
It was a huge room. And to maintain that through a series was a pretty incredible. It was
Wow.
a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it ended up being a very iconic film that's talked about this many years later. Um,
As it should be, because it was terrific.
you directed a handful of episodes of Family Matters, and talk to me about that, like what that difference is like compared to being a director of photography. I mean, I would assume that you would prefer more of the director of photography kind of work, but when
Uh,
the times that you stepped into the director's chair, tell me what that has
well,
been
because
like.
I wanted to. I mean, I find that I started out way back in the beginning of time in theater. I was still a teenager.
Yeah.
And I worked in regional and summer stock theater, uh,
Hmm.
and did everything, and even did some acting. Um, my interest in film, I am very much kind of in favor of this. It is a very cooperative effort, and I love having actors coming in that are involved, really want to contribute, make suggestions, as I would hopefully get from even crew members. There have been times where somebody has been attentive, says, what if, and try that out. And it's great. What the difference? I mean, I wanted to um, direct, and I've since then done other shows like News Radio and Becker
Hmm.
directing. I find it really enjoyable. I mean, you get to not only, and as a DP, I'm well aware of what is possible and what isn't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Was that so? In some respects, that's a big help. I'm kind of straddling, the active acting creative end and the whole technical end in terms of producing the show.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would assume that the director of photography, it's strictly from a visual sense, and then when you're director, you add on, as you had mentioned, kind of communicating with the actors, figuring out, how to say this line or how to, choose this blocking, how to, things like that. And it seems like that was an enjoyable addition for you once you became director for
Well,
those few
I'll give
episodes.
you one little quick example
Yeah,
as a director.
yeah,
This is not Family Matters. This was in a show I did with Ted Danson called Becker.
yeah. Great show.
It was a terrific cast too. So one little example: the scene as written. We were in the office, the Becker's doctor's office, and there was some bit of dialogue or something going back and forth with uh, the Linda character about planning some sort of surprise for Becker, right? And he, unbeknownst to her, he had come in and was standing right behind her.
Hmm.
Okay, while she's going on with uh, the character's name is Margaret, and
Hmm.
about what they're planning to do. And she says, but don't let him know. And in the script, there was a line and where Becker announces himself right behind her to
Hmm.
surprise her. Well, so I'm directing that scene, and it just occurred to me visually, what if there were no words? And
Hmm.
he was wearing like this little party hat thing to show off.
Hmm.
So instead of the line, what I had Ted do is just take the little party hat thing, pull it up, and let it snap on top of her head. Well, she turned there. So the whole, it said so much more visually, and it was much more funny than a line of dialogue. So
Yeah.
as a director, that's some of the things you can bring.
And I would imagine the audience reacted wonderfully to that. And how did the actress react to that
I
choice?
thought it was great.
Yeah.
Dave Hackle was I pitched it to Dave when we were doing a run through, and I said, "Listen, here's what we're gonna do. Just take a look at it and see what you think."
Hmm. Hmm.
Everybody laughed, so that was that.
I love that. Um, Speaking of shows like Becker that you've worked on, so you're talking about being a DP on Becker with Ted Danson, New Adventures of Old Christine with Julia Louise Dreyfus, and Till Death with Brad Garrett. And right away I'm thinking like, oh my God, these are like three heavy hitter stars. They've been on these iconic sitcoms prior. Everybody Loves Raymond, Cheers, Seinfeld. And going into these next shows that they're doing, for you as a DP, does that add some sort of pressure to get it right, get it perfect because you kind of want to meet the standard of the stars, or is it just kind of another job that you want to excel at as
I want to meet my standard.
I see. I see. So it doesn't really.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It's about the script and performance.
Mm,
Whether if you're, I don't care how famous you are or what you've done before. This right now, this is what we're doing, and it's
yeah.
either going to be convincing and funny and or not. It's not about dragging along a credit list.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know it's all explained in the visuals, but I wonder if there's a way you could describe the the Gregg Heschong brand as it pertains to your director of photography. Like, how can somebody watch an episode where you have worked on it and say to themselves, okay, yeah, what I'm seeing here, that's a Gregg piece of work compared to whatever other DP might do. Like, is there like a way to describe it, or is it just you got to see it to believe it?
Well, I'll give you one little example on this again. So one of the things that I'd worked now, you take Family Matters. Family Matters was a challenge because every week you would have a cast of mixed races.
Mm,
I've got all kinds of different skin tones. How
mm,
do how do I light for each character?
hmm
And they're moving around, so it's not like one setup, another setup. This is constant. So I would experiment, and I actually came up with a specific package of filtration for the lamps that was very complementary to each skin tone,
Hmm.
and people could walk within it, and it worked really well. The other thing, with my theater background, bringing in certain types of instruments that normally weren't used in motion picture production to a certain degree. But for example, there's a it's called an ellipsoidal light. It's called a LECO. And if you go to a theater production, this is how theater is lit. And I started bringing those into the sets for a number of different reasons. One was to reach characters' eyes from even across a set, which when you're working with four cameras is not that damn easy to do because you've got four cameras all happening at once.
Mm.
So I can't just light you for one shot and then move on. I've got to have the whole scene seamlessly lit for the entire run of the scene.
Huh.
So I would start you, and we developed a certain filtration for these LECOs too that would, be able to selectively pick out where a character was standing for that moment. And given the technology kind of evolving, be able to dim those lights in and out as needed. So I would. There was a lot I asked of the electric crew and the grip crew to put these shows together, but it would. I'll going to Becker. There was a time I remember Ted. So I would use this technique also for other shows at Becker. And Ted came up to me one day and he said, this is the first show I've ever been able to see my eyes.
Wow, really? Like even like Cheers, the
Yeah. Well, go back and look, and you'll there is, yeah, there would because everything in a multiple camera format has to be from above primarily.
mm,
You can't put anything obviously in the set like you would do in single camera. So everything has to be lit from above or from the front, from the back, but it's
right.
out, it's out of sight. So these were ways I was working to be able to reach through a set and light it a little bit more like you would in a single camera show from setup to setup to setup. So yeah, Ted
Wow.
Ted was watching. He said, and if Cheers is a great show with a tremendous cast, but if you do look at it, you'll notice that people kind of have what are called raccoon eyes. There's
Yeah.
the lights all coming from above, and it gets their eyes get dark.
Yeah, now that I think about it, yeah.
So there's a difference.
Yeah. Now that I think about Cheers, I mean there does seem to be sort of this like I don't know, this dimness to the bar lighting, sort of like it's, you know, that light that you shine on somebody if you're giving them a detective interrogation, but you turn down the lighting just a little bit.
Well, I mean, it was the process they used. Now, this goes back quite a ways. This is all film now, right?
Yeah.
Even Family Matters we were shooting on film. As I recall, what I'd heard from Burroughs when I was working with for Cheers, they wanted to try. They would so the camera shoots color negative, but what they did was then make. If I may be wrong, but I think I'm recalling this correctly. What they did was then make a positive print.
Hmm.
And that's what they transferred, which would be inherently more contrasty.
Hmm.
So it wasn't, but my understanding, that was a conscious choice on their part.
Now, talking about uh filtration and making sure that people's skin tones look great. I'm just gonna give an example for Family Matters. Like you take the teacher Miss Steuben from season 2, who's white, and then you take Julia White as Steve Urkel, who's black, and then you put them in a scene together. Can you just give me an example as to how you make their skin tones look equally appealing and, you know?
There's the level of light, the amount of illumination. So
Mm,
I could plan and adjust that accordingly. So let's say for Jaleel, he might be standing wherever he's standing, and I might increase the luminance just slightly,
mhm.
and then who were you referencing, Miss Steuben?
Miss Steuben, the teacher who is
Yeah,
sick and tired of Urkel.
right. So I might reduce the amount of light there, but the other thing would be in terms of the filtration from the lamps. I forget the name of the specific gel that I finally adopted that would work terrifically for not for both skin tones, for black skin tones, for white skin tones, and in between too.
Mm,
And then I would be able to, when the show is transferred in post, either increase or decrease that amount. So for like Jaleel, he would have the full effect of this. It sort of would warm the skin tone a little bit,
mhm.
pleasing. But I could, for a character, a very white character, I could reduce that slightly in post.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
It would look seamless.
Yeah. This is great information that you're telling me. I never, because I just kind of figured like, all right, you know,
It
you
gets
just do
shot.
the
Somehow
yeah,
it gets
exactly.
shot.
You do the best you can with what you got, but I didn't think about like, you know, say you had a show with all white people or all Asian people, that's probably going to be a lot more easier for a DP to handle because everybody's kind of consistent as opposed to a more diverse show like Family Matters where it's like, oh my God, like I got to make sure that this white person looks good in the light or this Asian person looks good in the camera. So yeah, this is great information.
And thankfully, we've moved into a time where these days most casts are diverse. It's not just a bunch of white people on a set, unless it's a period piece,
Yeah.
or or if you were doing a solely black film. I mean, which
All
some
right.
done too.
Can you talk about some of the commercial DP work that you've done? I mean, you've done commercials for 7-Eleven,
Yeah.
McDonald's. Um, you know, what about that stands out to you as opposed to doing like a TV show
Well,
or a film?
commercials are a whole nother game. A they really pay well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Can you disclose how much?
well, I mean, these a
You don't
lot
have
more
to.
generally. I mean, than doing an episodic series, but and they're finite. There's a but one of the I remember doing this back in the day. I worked with uh, uh, I guess what would be best called a special effects house production company. It was called Robert Abel and Associates. Now this we're really going back in time here. This is late 70s,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just a punk kid pretty much. But they wanted me, they hired me, I'm there, and I got to do all kinds of things there. I actually built miniatures that I would then photograph. But there was one series of spots I remember doing. I think it was for Chevrolet, and we had setups in on stage and studio. But uh, I they actually sent me to New York to go do
For those.
aerial shots, from a plane or a helicopter or something.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I did a whole series. I don't think I have a copy of that. I wish I did, of that were inserted within the commercial of these aerials from New York. I remember once flying, like doing a whole circle a number of times around the Chrysler building at night, hanging out the side of a helicopter.
Oh my God.
This building. I mean, it was, you got to be young and kind of
And not afraid of heights.
not afraid of heights. Yeah, but the shots were absolutely fantastic. I did them at an altered frame rate, so it kind of stuttered. It worked really well within that commercial. And there were others in terms of commercials. I remember doing a whole series for United Airlines, and we were once on this was at LAX actually, and doing some takeoff shots.
Mm-hmm.
I think there wasn't only just 747s, but taking off. So I was, and the people that were with me on the end of the runway. So the jets, come off the taxiway and line up on the runway to take off.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm behind the plane, and we've done a number of shots, of watching the planes lift off. And this one pilot must have come around and seen us. And hand to God, he got the clearance for takeoff. He must have gunned those engines. He blew everything away.
Oh no.
Back to the backstop where the I mean,
Oh no.
everything that was loose was gone.
You didn't know you guys were shooting.
What?
You didn't know you guys were
I
shooting.
think my guess is he knew we were shooting.
Oh.
And he decided to just. I mean, there was no reason for that, but whatever. I mean, it's all on film.
Oh, okay. My God. All that stuff.
That was a surreal experience. Yeah.
I bet. So I guess the question in terms of like doing commercials, since they could be fun, adventurous, like you had described, and they also pay very well, why not just do DP for commercials? Is it just because like, there's not as much work for that and you have to kind of like vary it up, or do you like more of a challenge with TV and film? Like why?
I like telling stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really why I gravitated toward this, not only as a cinematographer, but also as a director. I mean, commercials are fun, but, and you're kind of telling a little tiny story, but there's no real arc to it. You're not, developing character week after week. And that's what's great about, feature films and episodic television. And I like telling stories. So there you go.
IMDb said you had an uncredited camera operator experience on a Family Matters episode. I think before you had officially been hired as their DP. Did starting out in the earlier days as a camera operator, did that kind of plant the seeds for your interest to take it up to the next level with director of photography? Because there's a visual component that seems to be in common between camera operating and director of photography.
Well, yeah, there's composition. Exactly.
Right.
Did that lead me to? No. You're talking to somebody. I was, I did the theater. I went through the UCLA film department. Luckily, I made it through the first 2 years. They were probably ready to get rid of me those first 2 years, because the only reason I was there was to start working in film. And, the first 2 years of undergraduate college is all general education. And I was so ready. I think they were ready to bounce me out. But once I got into the film department and was actually producing it. Now, my interest has always been in not only shooting, but directing. And so camera operating, why was I doing that? Because I referenced that one, excuse me, firm I was working with, Robert Abel and Associates. There's something, the difference, union, non-union, right? At this point in time, Abel and Associates was a non-union house. And honestly, I'm so old at this point, I can remember the time when you couldn't get in the union. unless you knew somebody.
Oh yeah, really?
I mean,
Wow.
it was like a real close. I actually was part of a class action suit against the Camera Guild at one point
Hmm.
because of, you know, but long story short, so working with Abel, um, they actually became a signatory because of some of the work they were doing. So
Hmm.
here was my entry. Because they were becoming a signatory, I was now eligible to join the union, which I did. And I had a choice back then of either going into the union as a still photographer, which I'd done a lot of still photography, or as a camera operator. And
And I'm sorry, what is the union called that represents
it's called the International Cinematographers Guild, or local, I
I
think,
see.
local 600. It's part of the whole IATSE
Yeah.
uh, union organization, which covers every craft you can think of. You pick
And
it,
and
makeup,
and you
hair.
can only get professional work joining the union, or is there a way to
Well,
break in non-union?
is there what?
Is there a way to break in and say do TV and film doing like being a non-union member, or can you only be in
Yeah.
the
Well,
union to
these days
get that work?
it's much easier. You
Right.
can actually build up so many hours and apply, and you become a union member.
But back then you had to
But
know
back
like a
then,
cousin.
yeah, back then it was still so old Hollywood
Yeah.
that if you didn't know somebody, forget it. There was so anyway, they became so I had a choice, and I decided, I'm gonna still photography really is great and I love it, but I'm gonna go in as a camera operator. Of course, nobody knew me. So I starved for a couple of years
Mm.
because nobody knew me, but you gradually build up credits and contacts over the years.
What
So
would you say? What would you say was your first big break into the work that you wanted to be doing?
as a camera operator,
Not as a camera operator. No, I mean as
well,
like.
one thing leads to another. For example, as a camera operator, let's see, so there was, I had the opportunity to work with Sven Nykvist, who was Ingmar Bergman's cinematographer, done all those great films.
Ingmar Bergman.
No, his cinematographer's name was Sven Nykvist.
I see. I see.
So Sven, anyway, Sven came to the States and was doing some American productions at that point. So I actually, just by some of the other work I'd done, the people I knew got to work. I was hired by Sven to do, I did a film with him called Cannery Row as a camera operator, which was fantastic.
Hmm.
Uh, another film, well, with Bob Fosse, called Star 80.
Hmm.
So I was a camera operator on that too, which was a really unique experience.
Did you do any camera operating on the Carol Burnett show, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour? I know you.
You're, I'm a young, no, I was actually what Carol Burnett show. I was actually what's called a page back then. I,
Okay.
I worked at, I was still in college, and this was my, kind of part-time job I landed. So I was a backstage, page for the likes of the Smothers Brothers show and Carol Burnett, where you, did whatever somebody wanted you to do.
What did you do? Like, what were the responsibilities they gave you?
Run errands, you handle audience coming in, uh, yeah, it just kind of, make sure somebody was in the right place and whatever you were directed to do.
So a version of like a show business internship where you're.
Yeah, exactly. But I met a whole lot of great people then too. I mean, Steve Martin was a writer on the Smothers,
Yes, he was.
but I also, was able to. I remember having one really interesting day when Joan Baez came on the Smothers show, and this is back when the draft was still a really happening deal.
Hmm.
I was just the proper age for it too. And so we did,
Vietnam War draft. Yeah.
yeah, for Vietnam. Um, so Joan had come on this episode and I had introduced myself, and then it was how I ended up doing this. I can't quite remember, but the show, that episode was over, and I spent about 2 hours after the show, what was called the artist entrance, with Joan Baez and Tom Smothers discussing world events, the war in Vietnam, what all was happening. It was, I,
Yeah.
I think I was probably, what was I then, 19 or something?
Yeah. Yeah. And I bet that was a discussion filled with what? Anxiety, frustration,
Yeah.
curiosity.
Yeah. Not only my part, but theirs as well.
Yeah. Is there any, did you gain any cinematography education of sorts by observing what was happening with the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour and the Carol Burnett Show? And like, were you picking up on what the DP did this day or what the camera operator did that day, and that kind of like stayed with you as
Well,
you got into it
sure. I mean,
professionally?
it was a different medium because those shows were all videotaped.
Mm,
They weren't filmed.
right.
So there's, videotape in those days had different requirements. But yeah, was I paying attention? Yes, I was, and how the shows were put together. And I actually, I can still remember there was a show that I'd come back from doing a feature, and I was asked to come and shoot it was like it was no audience, but it was kind of a little multiple camera, single camera show, a show called Open House.
Hmm.
And actually, Ellen DeGeneres, that was her first job.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's where I first met Ellen. And
Nice.
that's an aside. Anyway, the point was this was a videotaped show, and which meant you had I was lighting the show, but off the set is something called the truck where all the technicians are, the video controllers and all that.
Hmm.
And I remember this one guy telling me, "You've got to make it brighter, and flatter." And I said, "That's not what I'm doing here. That's not what
Right, right.
but that was kind of like this old school attitude of how things had to be. It was like,
Yeah.
it's like the old trope is that comedy has to be bright.
Not necessarily. No.
No, not, no, not necessarily. It's true, but trust me, I ran into that a lot of times. Comedy has to be bright. No, it doesn't.
Can you give me an example of a comedy that you worked on where
It
you
was
darkened
darker.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look at an like the Becker series. It's got a kind of much more moody, darker feel to it.
Yeah. Did Family Matters ever have that moment, or were you always told to keep it as bright?
There were episodes where I, yes, went a little bit more that direction.
Can you think of one?
No, there was an episode, I forget exactly what the storyline was, where Laura was having some big issue, and we had some really nice quiet moments
Hmm.
with Laura and mom. And it was at night, and I made it very much more.
Are you talking like a back porch moment, like
Yeah, yeah,
Laura,
yeah,
Laura and Harriet having a talk?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. With Harry, it was Harry and Laura. Anyway, I remember making that kind of darker, more moody. It felt right.
Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, just off the top of head, I know Laura and Harriet have had intimate back porch conversations
Yeah,
about Harriet telling Laura to go easy on Steve Urkel because
yeah.
it's nice to, have a guy who likes you. And Harriet was kind of commenting on how she wasn't get paid attention to as much by her husband, Carl Winslow. Moments like that.
We would also sometimes have night scenes in some episodes where I would bring the house down and make it.
Yeah. Oh, like when Rachel and Harriet were trying to figure out what to do about their father who came back to their life for
Right.
the first time in many years. So that's an example of a very uh, dramatic, dark back porch moment where you kind of brought the house down. Yeah, yeah, I love
So I
that.
mean, again, I've always felt every script, every episode dictates the mood, and I'm there to visually interpret that mood.
I love that. Well, speaking of outdoor scenes, what I was impressed by, and thank you for sending me the link to this. You were director of photography for 10 episodes of the series Abby's, and
Oh yeah,
yeah, usually when multicam sitcoms shoot outdoors, it's like they're shooting a film. There's no audience present. It's just something that the audience has to see like afterwards on, I don't know, a TV screen in the soundstage studio. But you actually filmed outdoor scenes with the studio audience actually present at the outdoor.
I tell you, that experience was so much fun.
Yeah, can you talk more about it? Like what led you
Well,
guys to create that
so
innovative moment?
the original pitch when I came in to talk with Josh Malmuth, who created, was that he wanted to do this half-hour comedy outdoors. Was the conceit of the show was Abby, you know, a veteran, was kind of running this you know, neighborhood bar outside and back of her house.
Right.
The neighborhood characters would come and, you know, hang around, kind of Cheers like. But he wanted to do it outdoors, so that's where we started. We found this was on the Universal back lot. It was up on top of a hill in the back lot of Universal. There was an old some kind of structure existing that fed power to something, right? So the production designer actually, she built around that, creating the house and the outdoor bar. And we brought in bleacher seats for the audience.
Mm.
And I built a camera aisle just like would do on stage. But the real challenge was there's nothing above you. And remember,
Yeah.
with multiple camera, everything has to come
Yeah.
above. So
Yeah. All the lighting and everything is above in the interior.
So there's where I pulled from all of my experience in, you know, kind of experimenting on Family Matters and Perfect Strangers and Becker and all that in terms of how to light across an open area. So with production design, we put things in where it could hide some of those theatrical lights, and the set dresser. We went through all kinds of pulling stuff out of that had practical lights or things that could hang in the set that would help serve, you know, illuminating certain areas. So it became a kind of interdepartmental challenge bringing this together, and it was it was so much fun. You know, and we'd shoot at night.
You know, and I would imagine if I were DP on that show where we're filming outdoors with an audience present outdoors, like I'm automatically worried about something that's out of my control, like say the weather. Like how was that?
Well, if it rained, it would rain, wouldn't it? I mean,
Would you guys shoot around that or?
well, we in the run that we had, I only remember one night that it started becoming kind of damp.
Mm.
It didn't actually rain, but we had a whole duplicate set down on the lot on stage.
Just in case.
Yeah. But so that was actually used for rehearsal. So we'd rehearse on that, you know, copy set. And then on the day that you start camera blocking, we moved up the hill to the actual outdoor set with cameras and everybody to, you know, block rehearse the show and then the next day shoot it.
How did the audience take to being outdoors and witnessing this show? Did you have anybody that was like fishing for their jacket?
Well, yeah, but it's quite the adventure, you know. By the end, we were. I mean, it had really. There were like little space heaters above. There was a covering over the audience at this point. It was. You know what it was? It was like going to the Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah.
That's what it was like.
Do you think that could have been sustained beyond the 10 episode run? Do you think that could have been?
Oh, sure. I thought the show had a lot of promise. Why NBC decided to pull the plug on it is beyond me.
Right.
But there you go.
Yeah. I saw that you were a director of photography on 70 episodes of the sitcom News Radio. And any memories that pop out from working on that show? You know, working with the late, great Phil Hartman, Joe Rogan, who's now, of course, you know, the biggest podcaster in the world right now.
Yeah. But that was a tremendous cast.
Yeah.
Phil, I mean, you know, Joe was much younger then. Maura Tierney, you know, Dave Foley, Andy Dick. It was, as an ensemble cast, you talk about being inventive, you know, or improvising. That went on every damn week.
Does that make your job more fun, more challenging?
Both.
Okay. It's a conflicting thing. Yeah.
I mean, it was just the energy on that show was tremendous because it was kind of, you kind of never knew from day to day what was going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, but there's kind of a great discovery when you embrace that. uh, and say, this is how we do it, and this is who we are. So I had a great time with that show, and was fortunate to be able to direct some of those episodes too.
Is there something like is there like a visual example that you can think of from news radio that kind of warms your heart in terms of your DP work?
Look at the last episode.
Oh wow. I think the last episode that I mean, at least IMDb said that you left after season 4, which
Right,
was before the Philip Hartman tribute episode in season 5.
right.
Um, but you worked in the on the very last episode of News Radio, is what you're saying?
Oh no, that season, which was the Titanic episode,
Yeah, the Titanic parody.
where
Yeah.
it's where the newsroom becomes the Titanic.
Oh wow. Okay, can you talk more about that, or is that something
Well,
I?
it was how much fun was that? I mean, it was redressing the whole thing to make it like a ship,
Wow.
and everybody. Stephen Root had a great character. I mean, Phil was. They kind of who was the Foley was the captain.
Hmm.
Maura Tierney had kind of the part of the girl. Anyway, it was we just went to town on that thing. But outside the windows of the newsroom, it looked like you were at sea.
Yeah.
Um, I remember turning one of the script points was Joe Rogan's character was like the engineer or something, keeping the boilers running, and the whole news radio bathroom turned into the engine room with a glowing fire. And
Yeah.
we had water, one point the elevator doors have to close because it's flooding. Like,
Oh my God. And that was like was that not too long after the actual movie Titanic came out?
yeah, yeah, well, sure. When did Titanic come out?
97, I believe.
Yeah, so it was a little bit after.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
We were
very timely.
referencing a lot of it. So I mean, as a standout kind of really fun episode to do, I would pick that.
I love that. And I think you were second unit director of photography for the 1984 film version of Dune. Is that correct?
Yeah, I worked on Dune.
Can you talk about that and maybe comparison that you picked up between what you did and what they're doing now?
So that was a whole different experience. I mean, we were down there in Mexico City at the Churubusco Studios for months, and there were days that like nothing was happening. I had script changes or things that I wasn't all that privy to, but as one of the units, you're certainly affected by that. But it was a great kind of the sets were amazing. We had a great sort of international, not only cast but crew. We had people in from France, from Germany, Mexico, of course, Spain, Italy,
Yeah.
and we're all thrown together down there.
Do you mind describing more of the set design and maybe what parts of the script you weren't privy to?
But I wasn't privy to.
Correct.
Well, I mean, that's a lengthy film. There was,
Yeah.
I mean, the set design, was very steampunk. Isn't that the kind of term that I think got
Hmm.
bandied out a lot? I mean, they were cavernous, the sets, and we used, I think, almost all the stages at Churubusco. I mean, building those sets. The thing that was, you could get lost on some of those sets.
Yeah.
The way they would wend around, and it technically it was a real challenge with all the effects and stuff that had to move. But it was my main memory of doing that film is not only all of the international people, but just the sort of on and off again production. It wasn't the most seamlessly run set.
No. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, I don't. Again, I wasn't up in the script department
Right.
or talking with David about what he wanted to do.
Mhm.
And could they afford it?
Right.
So what would delay production or push it ahead? I didn't.
Have you seen the current Dune films? Do you have any?
So the first one.
What are your thoughts about that and maybe how it
Yeah,
compares?
it's a really good film. I think it's probably a little more intelligible
Mm.
than what we did. I mean,
Is that because of the like the advanced technology, or
well,
what do you
no,
mean?
I think just, I mean, yeah, maybe to a certain, but mostly script, I think,
Right.
It was the first Dune was really interesting to watch. I don't know that it held an audience's attention as well
Mm.
as one might have held. Oh,
Mm. Got it. Got it. Um, what are you up to today, Greg? I mean, what's cooking for you currently as a cinematographer?
well, I have fingers crossed. I've got a meeting coming up with a couple of showrunners that I've worked with that possibly have it's called a greenlit script for. I don't know when we'd start. It hasn't started yet. This is April. Um, maybe come May. There's no real sort of production schedule anymore, and especially with what streaming has done to television.
How has it affected your work, the streaming world today? Like, what is? I wonder for I know what it's done for actors, but what it like for a director of photography? Like, what does that mean?
About the same. It's
Yeah.
it's very much more of a scramble.
Yeah.
Things are much shorter. You
Yeah.
can't really settle in. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at the Family Matters. How many years did that show run?
9 years. Yeah.
9 years.
Yeah.
Um, with it has its ups and downs and problems and stuff, but it's something. There's a consistency there, and you could develop,
Mm-hmm.
you know, character or looks at when you're doing. I mean, I did a series. What was what 6 episodes?
I know the seasons are getting
I
shorter.
mean, you're done shooting before you even know where the bathroom is.
Oh wow.
So
Yeah.
it's become much more of a scramble. And it's interesting because at the moment they'd asked me to come down and teach a production class at USC.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing so. Here I am talking to 20 somethings, and they're just getting started. But the world they're going into now compared to when I was that age
Mm-hmm.
is so different. So different.
It's just so weird because like you would think that with the billion options for content that we have, that there would be plenty of work for everybody, but I think it's kind of goes back to what you said. I mean, it may be a lot of content, but the seasons are getting shorter, and maybe there's just a wider pool of competition that you have to.
I think on one hand, you could probably count or refer to shows that have a following that
Mm,
people actually watch and discuss.
mm. Yeah, there's only a small handful. Yeah, yeah.
I think it's one hand.
One hand?
Yeah, just one hand. You go back to the days, even before I was really to where uh, television, I mean, shows you'd be doing a whole lot more episodes. You had a
Yeah.
huge following.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you could get, I mean, Family Matters, especially. I mean, like, what, they were averaging like 20, 30 million viewers an episode. So, yeah.
Go back even further with the likes of, the Mary Tyler Moore or Bob Newhart or,
Yeah.
Sanford and Son or what they had. People knew the shows. They would watch them religiously. That's not really the case anymore, and it's
Yeah.
very fragmented. On the one hand, the fact that I'm glad there are still shows that are being shot in film because it teaches you a real discipline as opposed to digital production where you could just keep a camera running from now until the cows come home and who cares
Right. Right.
because it's cheap. But that aside, I think the real plus thing with the digital sort of revolution, if you want, has been the great democratization
Oh,
of
yeah.
the medium.
More people than ever can make a film or a TV show. You know, you get, I mean,
I could take this out of my pocket,
yeah, the smartphone. Yep.
make a film. So that's the plus side. The negative side is it's just uh, that I don't know that there's the discipline in terms of story development,
Yeah.
production that
Yeah.
you had with film.
Yeah. 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 Because there used to be a time where there were fewer options. So that means that, you know, you really had to be on your game. It was a very selective process. And So yeah, there's a plus and a minus to what's going on today for sure.
Like that's life.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. How can we keep in touch with you, Greg, if someone wants to follow your work? Do you have a website? Do you have a social media that you can direct us to?
I'm no, I don't have I had a website at one point. I haven't really
Right.
kept that up, and I'm not much in the way of social media. I mean, yeah,
You're better off without it, trust me.
yeah. Well, I mean, I pay attention to what I want to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Um, I actually have to go uh, install myself with IMDB because they have a different tiers. I think at one point my subscription lapsed. So what they do then is your important projects and things, they just sort of dump them. And
Mm.
anyway, so I have to fix that, reinstall myself.
All right. Well, we can't wait when that happens.
But in terms of, I don't know, following is it's the productions I guess I've done.
Yeah. Speaks for itself.
That's why I was there.
Well, Greg Heschong, man, thank you so much. I mean, I'm so glad that you gave me a nice, perspective on your cinematography experience. Obviously, you have a lot of wonderful credits on the resume that we got to touch on.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. It was great meeting you, and yeah, you do a damn good job in terms of interview.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you.
Well, it's informative, it's comfortable, it's kind of exploratory, which is great.
I love that. Wonderful. All right. Well, take care of yourself, Greg. And we'll talk later. Thank you.
You got it. You as
All
well.
right.
So I will say arrivederci.
Redaction. All right. Thanks, Greg. Take care.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye. All right, Greg Heschong. What a guy. What a guy. I would usually want to direct you to a website or social media to follow him, but he doesn't have either of those. So yeah, just do an internet search. You can find his IMDb. Uh, a lot of those credits are still valid. They're still there, despite what Greg has said about them dumping important projects. So you can get a nice perspective of Greg's work through that IMDb. Heschong is spelled Heschong, and Greg is spelled with two G's at the end. If you want to look him up online. And for those of you, listening, watching the Delicious Recap wherever you get your podcasts, thank you. If you're doing this for the first time, please continue to do so. We're available wherever you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, YouTube, iHeart, whatever. And you can follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, TikTok, Threads. I think that's it. Just search the Delicious Recap. You'll find a fabulous photo of Steve Urkel, Cream Savers, the cast of Living Single, the cast of Fresh Prince. That'll be us. That colorful photo that my co-host Andrew designed. And speaking of Andrew, he would be the one to usually say our ending slogan. So I will say it. He usually says it in a much more fun, creative way. So I will just get straight to the point and say, let deliciousness ring.